is it better working at PwC or working at EY? You'll find out by the end of this video. Let's start by talking about each of these firms, their history, and what makes them similar. PricewaterhouseCoopers, better known as PwC, and Ernst & Young, better known as EY, belong to an elite group of businesses known as the Big Four. PwC and EY are in this group alongside Deloitte and KPMG. If you're keen on learning more about Deloitte or KPMG, we have other videos on this channel dedicated to those firms. But in this video, I'm going to be focusing on PwC and EY. Let's start with PwC, and a common question I get asked, which is, how did PwC get its name? Well, PwC actually gets its name from being the result of a merger between two larger companies, Pricewaterhouse and 𝗂𝗏𝗏 in 1998. So even though PwC was formed in 1998, it came from a merger of two larger companies. And today, PwC actually has more than 700 office locations across more than 150 countries and territories. And in fact, it employs over 300,000 people across all those offices. And last year, PwC made $53 billion, with the largest amount of its revenue coming from its consulting and advisory services, where it works with clients such as JP IBM, and even Disney Corporation. EY, on the other hand, was founded 9 years earlier in 1989 as a result of a merger between Ernst & Whitney, which was founded in 1903, and Arthur Young & Co., which was founded in 1906. And similar to PwC, EY also has more than 700 office locations across more than 150 countries and territories, and today also employs more than 300,000 people. So on a location and global presence size, they're about the similar. But they do differ in their revenue. And last year, EY made over $49 billion working with clients such as Hilton, General Motors, and Walmart. As you can see, there's a lot of similarities between them. So what actually makes EY and PwC different? When I talk to PwC and EY employees and alumni, there's 3 points that consistently always come up. And I actually want to share what those 3 points are. So the first one is culture. When it comes to PwC, the term that I hear a lot is collaborative nature. A lot of PwC employees and alumni, they talk about how no matter where you are in the firm, it doesn't matter if you're coming in as an associate or if you're a partner, there's a lot of collaboration that happens between the ranks. So that's something you can expect at PwC that seems to be consistent. And this also helps to develop people and leaders in each of the practices as well. So there's a lot of mentorship here. And one other thing that PwC is known for is just their attention to employee benefits and well-being. So that's just part of the culture, is just really caring about the people. While at EY, you also get a similar culture of strong mentoring and also an amazing community. The thing that stands out with EY is you also get a diversity of projects to work on compared to PwC. So those were two of the major points that stood out when thinking about the culture of PwC and EY. The second thing that's different between the two firms is the expertise. When it comes to PwC, finance and audit is their bread and butter. It's actually their #1 source of revenue as well. And their advisory operations was actually the fastest growing business segment for PwC last year. EY, on the other hand, is known for their expertise in risk management, financial advisory, and analytics advisory. Their consulting practice has been the fastest growing business segment within the business in the last couple of years. And the third difference I noticed between PwC and EY is the exit opportunities. While a lot of opportunities are open to you, no matter if you worked at PwC or worked at EY, just look at all the alums who go there, there are a couple of fields that stand out. In fact, when I went through tens of thousands of alumni profiles on LinkedIn, there were a couple of career paths I noticed that PwC stood out in and some that EY stood out in. So this is really strong consideration when you think about the fact that there are over 300,000 employees at each of them, but yet there are certain fields that PwC alums and EY alums are more likely to get offers at. For PwC, I noticed that there were 3 types of jobs that PwC alums ended up landing in disproportionately higher than their EY counterparts. The first were advisory roles, especially within the mergers and acquisition teams. The second were leadership roles within the government and other public sectors. And the third are technology companies, both including startups as well as big companies like Google. When it came to EY, I noticed there were 2 fields that stood out when comparing the alumni profiles of those who worked at EY compared to PwC. And those 2 were this. First was the corporate strategy. So this could be corporate strategy for a company as a whole or within a particular department, such as marketing, operations, or product. But you'll notice that there's a lot of corporate strategy exits. And the second is finance, especially within private equity. But despite their differences, there's a lot of similarities you might have noticed between EY and PwC. So let's talk through some of the major ones. So first is the reputation and just their global presence. They're both leaders within professional services. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the Big Four. Second is the investment that they put into talent development. No matter if you put PwC or EY, both alums and employees talk about how much development they get professionally while they're working at the firm. And you can tell how impressive their training and development program is. If you look at the alumni at PwC, you will see people who went on to be the founder of Nike, the CFO of Stripe, or even the CEO of Delta Airlines. While for EY, you can find the founder of Home Depot, the CEO of Archer Daniel Midland, and even the CEO of Slumberger. But before you can get all the benefits of working at these firms, the impressive training, and the access to the alumni network, you actually have to be able to land a job. And luckily, the other similarity they have is if you're applying for PwC or applying for EY, the process is quite similar, which is each process is 3 steps. First is an online application. The second step is online assessments. And the third are live interviews. And once you get a job at these firms, the promotion path is actually quite similar in terms of timeline. While the titles might vary, no matter if you start at PwC or EY, your promotion cycle and promotion path are quite similar. So that means that if a friend of yours started at one firm and you started at the other one, assuming that you're both doing a great job, you'll be promoted roughly about the same time. So the titles vary. For example, at PwC, you'll start off as an associate, work your way up to senior associate, then become a manager, then become a director, and finally a partner. While at EY, you start off as an associate, then become a consultant, then a manager, then a director, and then a partner. And the compensation is actually quite similar as well. For similar positions across the firm, no matter if you are working at PwC or EY within the region, you're going to be paid pretty similarly. And more importantly, both firms are known to be in the top 5% of payers. So what this means is that when you get a job at one of these firms, you could be a 21-year-old without business experience working at one of these firms and earning in the top 5% of global earners. That's a pretty impressive note. But if you are curious, PwC on average does pay slightly higher. And this is even more true if you end up at the PwC Strategy and Group, which has an even higher salary. And the travel schedule is quite similar. And working at both firms, you're going to be expected to travel depending on the project and the client that you're working on. So again, the length of the travel, the distance of the travel, and how long you travel will depend on the client and the project. But both firms definitely expect that if you're on a project that's far away, you're going to be doing some travel. And as a result of that, the work-life balance is actually also comparable too. While there's not 40-hour work weeks every single week, there are weeks where you can expect closer to 40 hours and others where you can expect more than 60 plus hours, depending on the project that you're working on. Because you're working in a big four firm, especially if you're in the advisory or consulting practices, your work-life balance will come down to the type of project you're working on. So for example, if you're working with a new project, with a new leadership team and a short timeline and you're understaffed, you're gonna be working a lot harder than if you're working on a project that the firm has done for many years. There's an experienced leadership team, the client knows what to expect, and the timeline for the project is months or years versus weeks. But again, if work-life balance is something that you care about, I would really think about if working at EY or PwC is actually the right fit for you. But if you're willing to accept this trade-off, then you get the benefits that we talked about earlier about working at one of these firms. Something to keep in mind is that while both firms do invest in making sure you don't burn out and that you stay at the firm as long as possible, there is elements and times where you're gonna have to work a lot. In fact, when I sit down and I had dinner with friends of mine and I invited them to dinner for friends of mine who worked at PwC and EY, oftentimes they were late or had to cancel last minute because of client work or travel. Keep in mind that even though you get a lot of the benefits from earlier, there is a trade-off, and part of that trade-off is your personal life. So now that you know the similarities and differences between the two firms, which one should you work at? Is it better to work at PwC or is it better to work at EY? Whenever I work with someone who manages to land both a PwC and EY offer, this is a question I often ask is like, well, Davis, which one should I take? Should I take the PwC offer or should I take the EY offer? And really, I talk about two things. First off is the long term. I would think about what do you want to do after PwC or after EY? For example, I would think about the industries that they focus on. While both firms work on a variety of different industries, EY, for example, traditionally has had a stronger focus on risk, finance, and analytics. And you can also see this in the alumni and what they do afterwards, what I talked about earlier. So earlier, I talked about why those exit opportunities matter, but if you already know what you want to do and either EY or PwC already provides you a path to get there, then that should weigh into your consideration of which two that you take. But let's say that you don't know what you want to do and you want to keep your minds open or you just want to explore different industries and both PwC and EY is going to give you that, then I would think about the culture of the team that you're working on. So even though earlier I gave you a broad stroke overview of what the cultures are like, culture really breaks down into subcultures of not just the firm as a whole, not even the office location, but the team that you're on. So as you're going through the recruiting process, if there's not an industry focus that you want to be in and the teams allow you to both experience a variety of projects, I would think about what culture do you vibe with. For example, the people you meet, the interviewers you have, the people you correspond with, who did you feel as though you wanted to work with more? Because when you're working at either of these firms, as I mentioned, you're going to be working a lot of hours. And if you're going to invest a lot of the hours into it, you want to make sure that they're with people that you can actually see yourself with. It doesn't matter if you're going to work there for 2 years or work there for 20 years. You want to make sure that the culture vibes with you. And that's advice that I like to give people, which is focus on what you want to do after the firm. If you don't know what you want to do after the firm yet, then think about the culture of the firm and who you would want to work with every single day. And now that you know more about the similarities and differences between PwC and EY, I'm curious, which of the two firms are you more interested in, PwC or EY? Actually, if you comment below, I'll share with you resources on how to land the interviews and prepare for the interviews for whichever firm that you're leaning towards. For example, if you put EY below, I'll share with you resources to get your interview at EY and how to pass them. And if you're 100% sure about pursuing a consulting career at PwC, at EY, or another consulting firm, I'd love to help you even more. Here at my consulting offer, we're a team of former consultants, recruiters, and interviewers, and we recently put together a free training where we share the secrets of how to land and pass your interviews and eventually obtain that dream consulting job, regardless of your background. I'll provide a link to the free training below, and all you have to do is click the link below and be one step closer to your dream consulting job. But don't take my word for it. Hear from Christian. Christian landed his dream job at EY despite coming from a non-target school, having a low GPA, and his work experience was working at a bar. I hope you find Christian's story working at a bar to working at a Big Four as inspiring as I found it. I'll include his story somewhere above my head so you can access it. All right, I'll see you in the next video.